Ngadlugana, Yatanga, Imperenthi. It's really good that we acknowledge that we're meeting on Kaurna country today. And if you're coming from another landscape and country, hope that you get a moment today to acknowledge and remember the history of our landscapes. So thanks for joining in today. We're running these series to help share the great work that's happening right across Adelaide to cool it, to green it, to wild it, to make it more climate resilient. And we do that with a whole range of partners and people. And we're really excited to share all of these different projects and themes and issues across the year. So just a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available on Green Adelaide's YouTube channel. You're invited to ask questions at any time for those that are here live today by putting them into the chat. And we'll try and answer as many of these as we can at the end of the session. So today's theme is the wonderful world of weeds, and we've got Chris Brodie, and we've also got some other Green Adelaide staff members who I'll introduce at the end that will help answer questions as well. But just as a little intro, weeds can smother and outcompete Indigenous plants, degrade and destroy unique habitats and threaten the native fauna dependent on those habitats. The management of weeds is a complex task, as I'm sure many online probably have been involved in it. And it's heartening to see so many people online eager to learn more, and hopefully you'll all leave today more informed of the role that you can play in this complex system. And in today's seminar, we'll be hearing from SA's leading weed ecologist, Chris Brodie, as he delves into the important work of the Botanic Garden and State Herbarium and his role as a weeds botanist. So he will also look at the process of identifying new and emerging weeds. So he's got about 40 minutes of our time today. And then at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes discussion time. And we'll also be joined then by Shannon Robertson, our Regional Coordinator for Biosecurity and Species Management, and Julie Schofield, our Senior Landscape Officer. So I'll introduce those people to you, and you'll be able to see them on the screen, hopefully at the end. And then, yeah, I'll just update you with the next seminar series and how you can keep in contact. So I will stop sharing my screen and Chris will start sharing his and take us away. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. My name's Chris Brodie. I'm the Weeds Botanist here at the State Herbarium. And welcome to everyone wherever you're dropping in from. So today I am going to talk about the wonderful world of weeds. So what's that going to look like? Well, I'm going to give you an introduction to the State Herbarium where I work. I'm going to introduce my work as the Weeds Botanist in Green Adelaide and around the state. We'll look at some new and emerging weeds, and we'll finish with what resources are available to have a look. So let's talk about the State Herbarium. Here we go. We're in the Adelaide Botanic Gardens off Hackney Road there. We're in the old tram barn. See on your screen there. There's the front of the building, something I'm very familiar with. So what is a herbarium? Well, contrary to what most people ask, it's not a place where we go herbs. It is a scientific collection of preserved plant specimens and, importantly, the associated data with those specimens. That's where those plants were collected from, the date, and a description of them. We'll get into that. Most herbaria contain collections of flowering plants, that's angiosperms, conifers, etc., gymnosperms, ferns, bryophytes, that's your mosses, liverworts, fungi and algae. We'll talk in seaweeds there. So here's a picture of the herbarium, and we house over 1 million plant specimens, and these are not only collected from South Australia, all the states and territories, but from all over the world. Why? We'll get into that as well. Here we go. Here's an example of some of our collections. We've got pressed specimens, and we've got specimens in other forms. There we go. Technical issues. A herbarium stores plants in jars of alcohol to retain the structure. And there's our collection. We've got lichens, etc. One on a bottle there, and of quite an unusual specimen. But herbarium specimens, or in my world, are predominantly pressed and dried plant material mounted on acid-free paper in acid-free folders. Here's a Solanum specimen, one of many. We house quite an extensive Solanaceae, Solanum included in that collection here at Adelaide. So a voucher, as I mentioned earlier, it's your data plus your pressed specimen. And there we are. There is the pressed plant specimen. It is a technology that's been around for many hundreds of years, and it serves us well. It is better than a photograph. We can look within structures, we can move petals, move leaves, etc., and see the parts we need to look at. We can take pollen, we can examine that under the microscope. So a specimen is the ultimate. The pressed plant and the data, of course. We house those in a library. We house them in a library-like conditions, where if we've got 1 million specimens, you need to know where things are. So unless you've got a system, you've got no chance. So of course, it will come as no surprise, we've got a system. And things are laid out taxonomically within families, within genera, and then geographically. So for South Australia, for example, we break that down for our purposes into 13 botanical geographical regions. We label those regions. The black region, the southern lofty region, is the area Green Adelaide and the hills and Flurio are in, and specimens collected from that region will go in a folder, in an order, where we can find them. So, as I mentioned, the State Herbarium houses over 1 million specimens, and at least 5,000 of these are type specimens. So these are the records on which a species name is based. So when somebody finds what they think is a new species, they will describe it in the scientific literature. That description has to reference the collection or series of collections it's based on, and that is a type specimen. So here's a type specimen for an orchid. We've got other specimens too. Some of them are quite old. Here's a black specimen of Tribulus terrestris, caltrop. And we do hold historically important collections. Some of our collections date back many hundreds of years. This one is a specimen collected on the Captain Cook voyage, 1770. Right, now, hopefully that's given you a background to the work of the State Herbarium, is collecting plants, documenting what grows where in South Australia. My work, well, I document what weeds grow where in South Australia. For most people, they want to know, is this plant, is it a native plant or is it a weed? That's the first question they ask. If it's a weed, is it something to worry about? That's the space I'm in. But also, if it is a native plant, is it common? Is it rare? Should I be protecting it? So there we go. Oh, so as mentioned, we collect the plant specimen and associated data. Now, if you look at these two specimens, let's take the one on the left. Let's start there. Look at that. It looks, well, it doesn't look pretty. Is it a good specimen? what makes a good specimen? Well, how the leaves are arranged on the stem, how many stems and branches it has, how the flowers are arranged, how the fruits are arranged, same as the flowers in this case, and what they look like. So looking at that specimen, is it a good specimen? It's a fantastic specimen. Although it's not pretty, scientifically speaking, it's brilliant. Let's look at the one on the right. Again, we've got the stem and the leaves arranged on the stem, and we've got it in full fruit. No flowers, that's okay. When something is flowering, it's generally not fruiting. Fruits are produced from the flowers, so we've got it in fruit. So they are both excellent specimens. And here's a sample of our census. This is online, eFlora listing. In this case, we've got a subset of the rose family, because it's listed. We list by families, saying what roses occur growing in the wild. What rubus, these are your blackberries. European blackberry, panaceous weed around the Adelaide hills, Adelaide foothills, and as well in green Adelaide. And you might well be surprised to see there are quite a few different species of European blackberry. There are also some American blackberry there. Anything with a asterisk by it, that would be introduced weed. You'll see one without an asterisk, rubus parvifolius. That is our native raspberry or native blackberry. Sometimes it's mistaken for the introduced plant and sprayed out. So it is important we identify plants correctly to help us manage them in the environment. Knowing what you've got, where you've got it, helps with the management. So over the course of the last sort of 15 years or so, I've been collecting and documenting and adding new species to our flora, our census. Here we can see cumulative amount of species here. Here we go. Here's year by year. So we are still adding weeds to our flora as they jump the garden fence. These are weeds new to the state. These are not the weeds that spread from one area to the next. These are not the weeds that once in an area are expanding themselves. These are just new records for South Australia. So if this is what we're finding, just for new records, I wonder what we're finding, what we could find when we think about species expanding their range. And that's another reason to collect. Collecting weeds and documenting what species are moving into new areas. And because I have a handle of what's going on in the state, I'm uniquely placed to help identify these for people within the regions. It might be new to green Adelaide, but it might be very common in another region, which I may well have collected it in or know it from. So I'm well placed to help. This is how we do it, the old-fashioned way. Grab a branch with the bits you need, flowers, fruits, etc., leaves, and squash it in a press and record the information. So please don't read this, but here's a data sheet. So stakeholders, be they landscape regions, green Adelaide, councils, friends groups, etc. If they come across a plant they don't know, they will try and get it identified, and eventually it might well come to me, or I might be their first port of call after they and I asked, they collect, a branch, the flowers and fruits, or either or, what's available, and fill in all this information. It could be the first record for the state, it could be the first record for your region, or it could be an expansion of distribution. These days, I use an app to do such a thing, which is great. So I don't have to carry on paper forms anymore, or paper books. A phone in my pocket, click on the app, it's all the geolocation's already there. Here we go. Here's the interface. You can switch between map view and a list view, and there's all the information. So although when you walk into the herbarium, we have incredibly old specimens and we are using this old technology, pressed plants stored away like a library, part of our work has made its way to the 21st century. There we go. So if you find a plant out there, what do you collect? Now, different groups didn't require different things. Generally, you want flowers, fruits, stem and leaves. What about bulbs and things like that? Well, if you are collecting something like that, it's good to dig down and get the bulb. Now, if there's 1,000 plants there, if you've got permission to collect, it would probably be okay to dig a few up. If there's only one there, please don't take a photo. Don't dig up the only or the few plants that are there. So we need the bulb all the way up to the flower or fruit. This is the same with any grass type plant, grasses, sedges, rushes, and you'd get it from the root, and you'd get several flowering, fruiting stems, and collect those. Now, I put them in my press. If they're a meter's tall, you bend them into a U or a W shape, etc., so they fit in your press. Here we go, just like these grasses. And with grasses, some grasses are annual, like the one on the left, annual or some grasses are perennial. Grass on the left there, we've got the root, we can see there, it's quite robust. Other plants, we've got runners and stolons. So instead of just grabbing the top part of the plant, has it got runners or stolons? Dig around, and if it has, try and collect that. Other plants are annuals. An annual plant will grow and set seed in a single growing season. That can be a couple of months or more, or a whole season. How not to collect plants? Well, something like this, collecting too much material so you can't see the structure or of the inflorescence, how it's arranged, bundling it up as we see on the right is generally not the best idea. You have to have enough material to see what's what, but having too much is as bad. Once these things are dried, you cannot pull these stems, the plants apart, because they just fracture, and that's no good to man or beast. Same with herbs here. Obviously somebody's collected this, they've had it in the car, and then they've pressed it. Perhaps at the end of the day the leaves have all shriveled up, so we can't see the shape of the leaves. There's some fruit there, we can probably work that out, but there's way too much material. Here's some good examples of trees and shrubs. You can see the plant on the left there, I've got some buds. We've also got some older fruit. We don't have any bark or anything like that, so hopefully mention is made of that in the collection notes. What we can't collect, we make a note of. And these are all reasonably good collections. The one on the far right, we've got some rough bark, and not always possible to get bark. The bark's smooth, it doesn't detach from the tree. So yes, a photo will work. Include it with your press specimens and make a note of it. Now, it's a great idea when you're collecting your suspected weeds to put things in a plastic bag if you're walking across any environment, especially if it's got seed, to stop the seed blowing about, spreading to new environments, etc., new areas. However, once you're back at your vehicle or your office, etc., or home, you need to press that plant between some newspaper, as we've seen, because if you leave these plants in a bag, they will go moldy, like the plant on screen there, and you will not be able to get an idea off of that. All the important parts have long since vanished. And like I mentioned, we do need to record its location, like an address. Just saying South Australia isn't, it's not helpful, or giving a town or a location, not really helpful. These days, we take a GPS reading and we give a description so we can get to the same site, like an address. On Moriata Conservation Park at the base, first falls growing from rocks or something like that. And once we've got information like that, especially a GPS, when we add it to our data, because we have moved into the 21st century, of course, and we did that quite some time ago, we can plot species on stuff that are on the AVH, ALA, etc. Again, I'll get to those. Now, here we go, and traps for young players. Here we have, because sometimes people just grab a leaf, not a good thing to do, but just to be aware, we've got a simple leaf. That's the leaf in its entirety. It's got an auxiliary bud there, a leaf. It's a leaf. We've got a compound leaf and we've got leaflets. So sometimes people think they're grabbing a leaf when in fact they're grabbing a leaflet. And then we go to another extreme, doubly compound leaves. Again, somebody grabs a small part or leaflet, which is a small part of the leaf, and it's quite misleading. But there we go. That's just FYI. All right. Have a look. Priority and new and emerging weeds in Adelaide and the state. So in no particular order, there's a lot that I potentially omitted here, but you can only fit so much into a 40-minute talk. So let's start with a few I've been working on recently or I've collected recently, etc. Now, here we go. Here's one that Green Adelaide are mapping for potentially eradication. Control, I should say. Ornamental punching khaki weed. So there we go. We've come across a specimen. We've come across some plants growing. I've got my app out, recorded all the information. I've grabbed the plant, I've pressed it, and on the right there, we see the final press specimen. So what can I tell you about khaki weed? Well, those flowers are quite spiny, and if it grows in your lawn or anywhere and you step on it with bare feet, it's quite painful. It's quite unpleasant. It is present in the Adelaide region. It's been virtually absent for a very long time. However, Green Adelaide, myself, I work in partnership with Green Adelaide. We've been out there actively looking for it, and we found a little bit, which is great. It's not great that it's there. It's great that we found it growing where it is, so it can be targeted. What you see here is what we've been up to in February, a couple of days in February, and we look at the one on the top left. There we go. The information is in the app. It's easily accessible. And we can produce very quickly a data report where we spit out all the collection information and all the photos we've taken. So, and we can share that quite quickly and quite simply. There we go. We can see quite large patches. Quite large patches indeed, several small patches. On further investigation, it was found to be on the side of the roads, on different roads around this car park. On another day, the week before, we found it several locations, and the one with the red mark around it is in a caravan park. There we go, there it is. And caravan parks, it's important for us to target these areas because there's a high amount of traffic in and out. People will get the fruit because it's stuck on their clothes, on the bottom of their shoes, on their car tires, etc., and it will be easily transported to a different location, or flung off the car tires, etc., on the way through Adelaide to establish at a different site. So identifying and prioritizing your sites is sometimes as important as prioritizing the weeds you're going after. If you've got these weeds growing in an area where nobody goes, as opposed to a caravan park like this where the traffic is high and often, you're of course going to target these sites for control, I would imagine. Okay, let's move to another plant species, bufflegrass. There we are, bufflegrass. Not in the Green Adelaide region, anything in these photos, but these are just some photos showing what it looks like. There it is, and there it is in the Northern and York area by the railway. This eradication has since been eradicated, and there it is growing all the way up on the Northern Territory border. It grows in the Green Adelaide region, on the Fluorio, upper southeast. You can see its distribution there using AVH, the Australasian Virtual Herbarium, which collates all collection information from all herbaria and in a central portal, displaying it. So you don't just get a South Australian perspective, you get an Australian perspective on where it's growing. So bufflegrass, why is it a concern? Well, it's drought tolerant, highly invasive, produces huge amounts of biomass. It, especially in the drier regions, it outcompetes everything else, will form a monoculture because it produces so much biomass. It burns readily, and it burns a lot hotter than the native grasses. Our native grasses are adapted to fire, but when you get bufflegrass, that's super hot, and it will eventually not only kill those native grasses, it will kill those native shrubs and the seed bank, and even the mallee trees that grow in that area. It will kill those too. And it's an ecosystem changer, changing the ecosystem. So it's just bufflegrass. And of course, most of the native plants, insects, etc., don't find it palatable, so it becomes an eco wasteland. Here we go. This is the Atlas of Living Australia. This incorporates site records, not just herbarium records, which aren't quite as reliable as herbarium records. As this one down on the Fluorio, it is a site record. Ideally, I'd love to find that if it still exists and get a herbarium record. Of course, Green Adelaide and the State Herbarium have been actively searching out buffel grass, and this is some work we've done in the last month or two, searching out buffel. And of course, even in Adelaide, near a building site, abandoned areas, we're finding buffel grass. In a nearby property as well, we accessed buffel grass. Look here, the transport hubs in Port Adelaide and close by. This is how it's getting about. I'd imagine trucks, machinery, etc. There, and making those collections, they're verifiable. People can go back and look at those collections and confirm it. You can't do that with a site record. You have to trust John Smith or whoever it is, Jane Smith, that they knew what they were talking about. But when we've got herbarium specimens, that's useful. Here we go. These are two different species of buffel grass, both declared. Cenchrus ciliaris, the much more common one, fluffier seed, or Cenchrus panicetiformis, a little bit of a tougher, more rigid seed, etc. So it, like I said, it grows elsewhere. Sometimes it's not easy to identify grasses, even with herbarium specimens. If you're out of season, you don't have the structures you need. What is that? I don't know. Let's have a real poke around in that. Oh, yeah, look at that. It's got the characteristic spike there, and there's one or two seeds. So we're able to make some collections of those and verify it. It took some time. And as we're using this as a little bit of a case study, making sure you've identified your species correctly, especially if you are investing time, money, effort into its control, or something like that, have you got the right thing? Because there are a bunch of lookalike species for buffel grass. There are a bunch of other Cenchrus species about, birdwood grass, probably as bad, so it's okay if you mistake this for buffel grass and eradicate it, because it's introduced. There we go, there's the fruit there. We've got this lookalike species, Cenchrus ataceus, African fountain grass. Now, looks like buffel grass on steroids. There we go. There's our buffel grass. There's our fountain grass. Highly invasive. You would have seen this around the Green Adelaide area. I see it. It colonizes roadsides, and people leave it because it looks pretty. It looks attractive, and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. It's a menace. It's a menace, just like buffel grass. Here we go. We've got buffel grass on the right and Eniopogum nigricans on the left. Now, if you're not looking at these day in, day out, you may well be confused. And look, there we go. Eniopogum nigricans there. If you didn't know, you could easily confuse that for buffel grass. Here's pigeon grass, Ceteria versicolata. It's got that purple spikelet, also turned straw coloured, like buffel grass. And there was an incident where this was found down in the area. Won't say too much, but and then a whole lot of money was spent on its eradication, and then someone went, "Is it actually buffel grass?" And then I had a specimen turn out. I went, "No, that's Ceteria or pigeon grass or love grass, as some people know it as, because it sticks to you." And I said, "That's a different grass, not buffel grass." But unfortunately, there'd already been some effort on trying to control it. Got Rhodes grass, which can look like buffel grass before it opens it up into those digitate spikes like we see on the right. It looks like buffel grass on the left, or it certainly does when you're driving along the road at 60 k's an hour. There we go. We have got some buffel grass in that photo on the left. Many of these photos are not from in the Green Adelaide area, because it's not that common in the Green Adelaide area, and hopefully never will be. Okay, other plants. What other plants have we got? That's our little case study. We've looked at some recent work done with Green Adelaide, both on khaki weed and buffel grass. Green Adelaide contractor found this growing in Linear Park, probably taro, and taking over quite thuggish. Fortunately, it was nipped in the bud early on. There we go. There's a team of people removing it. We've got a flower spike there on the left, and there it is, been dug out. Brilliant work. Well done. And that very weekend after this, I saw taro for sale in the supermarket, which made me chuckle. Other things I'm seeing spreading in the hills, which are also making their way into Green Adelaide and have been found in Green Adelaide. Whether they're hugely relevant, whether we can do anything about them, I don't know. Spreading hedge parsley, Torulus arvensis. There it is, up on the side of Moriata. One side of Moriata in the hills, one side in Green Adelaide, the hillside. There it is again on the roadside, just outside of Green Adelaide, making its way into Green Adelaide. So I not only do work in the local area, field trips as well. And this was a trip to have a look at some Opuntia species, declared plants, quite invasive, it's cacti. Here's Bob, one of our honorary research associates, used to be a botanist for many decades here. And what are we looking at here? Got Opuntia puberola, the green one, and an Opuntia which has never been recorded growing wild in Australia, let alone South Australia, ruffida, growing in between that. There it is. Quite an unusual colour, and several patches on the same property. It was the landscape people who alerted us to this. So we went up, or I went up with Bob, so we could confirm its identity. And there it is, being poisoned. Wonderful, wonderful work. These Opuntia species can dominate the landscape, rendering it useless for anything really, both for environmentally and for stock, primary production, etc. While we were driving back to Adelaide, found that this Ostrich cylindrica, Opuntia cylindrica, another cacti, declared plant. Thought, well, let's just have a quick look at that. And while we were there, we found this unknown Echinopsis. It's not going to be the next big weed, as far as I can tell. Been there for decades, but it's just happily growing, slowly spreading. And there's Bob again, our resident cacti expert. He did not know what this species was, neither did I. And so we've got some work to do to try and identify what this is. Well, here it is. We made a collection, of course. Being a collections-based institute, we're all about collections and the data. People might send emails. Here's a location of this weed. Here's a location of that weed. We can't keep that information. We can keep that information if it's with a specimen and the data. Other trips we do, this was a year, I was fortunate enough to jump on a trip with the Seed Conservation Centre up to the Flinders Ranges. Marvellous area. There it is. Collecting seed. On the way back, here we go. I found this Euphorbia davidii, previously only known from one location, lining 60 kilometres of road. There it is. Recently went up to the Riverlands, fortunate enough to jump in the boat there, have a look around. Mexican water lily on the left there, and myrophyllum. We were out there looking at this iris, which has never been recorded on the Murray before, to my knowledge. So that was quite a significant find. There it is, yellow flag iris. But while we were there, having a poke around, thought I'll just collect that unknown buttercup, ranunculus. Got back to the herbarium. It turned out to be a declared plant thought eradicated in that area. So of course, I've reported it to PIRSA, back to the landscape region, sent a little report there. And because the river's used to irrigate areas, here's the rock face. I think it might have been growing along there. There's some native plants there, which is quite lovely. Also jumped onto a property to see what's this weedy grass. Not weedy. We've had floods. People are seeing plants they haven't seen in a long time. So native grasses are coming back. I've got native picrus, which most people went, oh, thought that was a weed. It looks like a weed, of course, but it's native. So you've got to be sure what you've got. Okay, so I'm going to run through this incredibly quickly if I've got time. So last year we had 15 new state weed records. So I'm literally going to run through these. Not all collected by me, collected by some of our volunteers, volunteer collectors, other collectors, etc. Rough leaf mallow, collected by Ron. Where did this come from? Well, it's a garden plant. It's sold in garden centres. 5 plants to jump in the garden fence. This Mauritian bindweed planted around the place. It's in several locations. Garden plant. Since re-evaluated it, been down many more populations. A true weed around the Victor area. Other things, again, planted in amenity planting, large wild iris. There it is, garden plant. This also a garden plant, self-establishing around the gardens and in native areas. Other things, fires have gone through on Kangaroo Island. Seedlings are coming up of proteas. What is it? It's a garden plant. We've got climbers like this one growing up in the hills. What is it? It's a garden plant. We've got fan palms coming up. That's what they look like there. Mature, you've probably seen them around. They're coming up, even in the arid areas. Where's that from? It's from a garden. We've got things that we have collections of, but I have recently, somebody else has collected them. Banksias, bull banksia. There we go. Again, Kangaroo Island, it's come up after the fires. Some of these things need fires. It's a garden plant. It's come from a native, Australian native garden, come up on the roadside. The seed has been spread by the fire. Other things, again, river resin bush here, down from Encounter Bay, plant collected by Ron again, garden plant. So the same with this Hagia. It's a garden plant. The same with a Melaleuca, coming up in the hundreds, lots of seedlings. Kangaroo Island after fires, garden plant. Some things might come up once in a blue moon, just like this white mulberry. There are other collections, garden plant. Several collections of this Alexander's, a herbaceous plant, garden plant. What's this telling us? Where are our weeds coming from? We've got one species that collected some time ago, but we've only just managed to identify and put in the collection. An acacia, rust and wattle. Is this revegetation work? Has this been transported on 4-wheel drive, on machinery, whatever? So there we go. So we're getting the picture that quite a few of our weeds might well be coming from gardens. So what resources are out there for us? Well, we've got to use our brain plus the websites, available to us. And if you're in Green Adelaide, you can go to the Green Adelaide website and find out about your declared weeds. You can find out about declared weeds around the state on the PIRSA website. Very useful. A lot of information on the PIRSA website. We can, if we want to identify things and we've got our smartphone, the iNaturalist app's normally pretty good. We can take a photo, upload it. We've got some AI in there, or which might help us suggest a name. If not, we post it, and the community help. There we go. We've got eFlora, maintained by the State Herbarium, which feeds into the ABH, which we've talked about. There's all the Bufflegrass records, which feeds into ALA, Atlas of Living Australia, including site records and some various information. If you want a good pictorial site, this is run by volunteers, Plants of South Australia. If you want some scientific descriptions, go to the Vic Flora. Or you can go to PlantNet. You can also, which is in New South Wales, descriptions and drawings, etc. We've got weed profiles, Weeds Australia site. There's a lot of information out there. It's very overwhelming, and I do realise. If we want information on the name in current use, we're getting quite scientific now. We go to the APC, or worldwide, we can use Plants of the World online. It's got images, distribution around the world, all World Flora online. Anyway, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I hope
Thank you so much,
some of it
Chris.
was useful.
Yes, look at all that. It is definitely a wonderful world of weeds, and there's lots to explore there at the end. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and your passion in this area. We do have a few questions, so I'll invite my colleagues Shannon and Julie that are online as well to turn on their video so everyone can see them, even though they can't see you. And perhaps, yeah, if you stop sharing, Chris, that'd be awesome. So yeah, these colleagues of mine have I did introduce at the beginning, but they are working at supporting urban biodiversity and conservation, supporting landholders, and probably many of you that are online. So they'll, between the three of them, be able to help us out with our last 15 minutes. So yeah, a few good questions in here. Can people from the general public submit specimens to the herbarium to be identified, Chris, or is that, do you have sort of specific volunteer collectors, as you mentioned?
So specimens we accept at the herbarium, we accept first and foremost, does somebody have permission to collect? Are you the landowner? If it's from your land and you've got permission to collect, that's the first important question. So if it's on the roadside, that's probably managed by the council. You need permission to collect, to remove plant material from the council. If it's a national park, you need permission or a permit or something like that. Yes, we do accept specimens, and I'm keen, always keen, to accept weed specimens. My capacity for processing, identifying those can sometimes be somewhat limited. Yes,
yes. I know, I'm sure there's only so many that a few people can do. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, that's some good tips for people to remember as they might go out keen from today. So that's really important. Are there any Australian natives that are classified as weeds now, that are like local natives, I assume? Well, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course there are. We saw in the presentation there like a Banksia. In the Green Adelaide area, of course, we've got things like Pittosporum undulatum from New South Wales and Victoria. We also have Flinders Ranges wattle growing wild around the Adelaide and the Adelaide Hills. Not a weed, of course, in the Flinders Ranges, but a weed here in Adelaide.
Yeah. Awesome. And what, on average, what percentage of new weeds that are identified are of significant concern in our region? Yeah, are they, you know, probably various.
Wow. So I suppose
Prioritisation
of the
process,
weedy
isn't it?
flora,
Yeah.
of the weedy flora generally, I'm going to take a step back. Of the weedy flora, 10% of those are sort of problematic weeds, and then 10% of those, or 1%, are really sort of pernicious, problematic weeds. So that's the general figure. Normally, weeds that people submit or we go looking for are the problematic ones, unknown ones, things that are spreading. So a reasonably high percentage of what's collected, but that's not representative of the overall picture, of course, as explained there.
Yeah. Sharon's got a very particular question around we have about 28,000 plants in total introduced to Australia, and about 3,000 of those have become naturalised and weedy. She was just wondering if those figures are still approximately correct.
I can speak for South Australian figures, of course. So
yeah.
We have roughly ballpark figures.
Yeah.
About 5,000 plant species growing wild in South Australia. A third of those, say 1,500, just over 1,500, are introduced or naturalised plants. So that's the figure for South Australia. The figure for Australia, I'd have to consult the literature on that.
Sure. Well, the South Australian one's probably more pertinent. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And there's a question here which is about a particular plant that maybe you can read a little bit later, but it might be more of a general question for you always. Yeah, how are weeds placed on the declared plant list? Is, you know, what's the process of that? Yeah, how is a weed identified as declared, I suppose?
Well, that's a great question. It's normally the landscape regions or Green Adelaide that propose these for declaration to PIRSA. So perhaps one of my colleagues, Shannon or Julie, could answer that question.
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to talk to that. So you're absolutely right, Chris. As Chris said, PIRSA manage the declarations for new plant species, and it's generally as nominated by landscape boards, and it's based on risk assessment. So PIRSA undertake risk assessments for different plants, and then it's decided if under the Landscape South Australia Act, if a declaration is actually going to help manage it. So the Landscape Act has certain provisions for declared plants, such as preventing them from being sold and enforcing control or destruction, movement on roadsides, things like that. So if a plant, for instance, is becoming a weed problem and it's common in nurseries, then sure, declaring it for, to prevent sale is going to help its management. But if you've got a widespread weed that's very common, it's an environmental weed, maybe it doesn't impact agriculture, it being declared under the Landscape Act for sale and things like that might not actually help its management. And if it's already being perceived as a weed, it's probably going to be already getting managed. So things don't always get declared.
Yeah. And so then is there a stage, and is it that is fully declared, and then there's another category, isn't there, underneath that, or in terms of that it's being managed, I suppose, as a weed?
No, it's either the weeds are either declared or they're not. And some plants are declared under certain provisions and some are declared under others. For instance, some declared weeds, there's no provision for control. It's just to get them out of the nursery trade, for instance.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. I think we'll that specific plant question came from a Randall that I think it's kind of crossing over quite a few landscape boards, so perhaps that's more of a direct question that we'll pull out and get some answers for you after the session, Randall. But really good to understand what that process is and what a declared weed actually means. So thank you, that's really useful. This one's more for community members that are online today. All three of you, what are the top kind of 3 actions that people can help how can they help to reduce weeds, manage weeds? You know, as you said, a lot of those ones are garden weeds. And so you're just like, oh, does that mean that I can't plant them in my garden? What does that mean? Can I not buy them? What should I do as a responsible urban, and especially for Green Adelaide residents as well, as an urban landholder? What are some top tips?
Well, I can speak to the garden plants, for example. Be aware of what you're planting in your garden. Be aware. Yeah, a lot of plants, as Shannon said, aren't declared, but they are weedy.
Yep.
And a lot of people grow water-wise plants. That's the definition of a weed. It doesn't need much water, etc. It's going to do well in our environment because it doesn't need watering. Is a water plant, is a water-wise weed in our garden a weed? No, but if it jumps the garden fence, it could be. Some of those things might have berries. Birds could spread them, etc. I came from a horticultural background. I love plants. I don't want people to stop enjoying their garden. Just be aware. Get involved with your local friends group, with the community. Use the resources online. Go to the Green Adelaide website, etc. Join your gardening club. Find out what is what. I wouldn't plant arum lilies in my garden because once you've got them, you can't get rid of them. They produce lots of seed. They spread vegetatively. Things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything else, Julie and Shannon, from your perspectives?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So we've seen with Chris's presentation a lot of maps with dots on them of where plants are. So one thing that really helps us understand what's happening in the environment is if things get logged, if they get mapped somehow. And so there's freely available apps like iNaturalist, which anyone can just pick up, and with a couple of presses of the buttons, you've actually mapped weed locations, and anyone can see where these weeds are. So that's really useful to just understand how things are, behaving in the environment.
And for me,
sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, and for me, at Green Adelaide and the regions, etc., having those specimens in the herbarium verified by a botanist with the dots on maps helps that declaration, because the risk assessment, everything is evidence-based. So you really do have to have the specimens verified by a botanist in a herbarium before anything as serious as a declaration can go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, so there's only 3 of us who cover the whole region of Green Adelaide. So if you guys are out there and you notice something odd, put the dot on the map. We can send Chris out there because we like making him work hard. And no, that's not true. But we can go out there and we can check that there are those weeds, and we can get that museum specimen record. And the other thing, going back to gardening, like Chris said, know what you're growing, but also there are a lot of other options. So if you see your plant getting a bit out of control, then trim it, make it look nice, reduce the berries, reduce the seed, reduce the fruiting, or choose some of our local natives, which are amazing. And there are a lot of other options that you can use in your garden and still have something that you really enjoy.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and we've got great resources on the Green Adelaide website for those kind of replacement options if you want to remove a weed and add a local native plant in our Adelaide garden guides and coastal garden guides. So those are 2 resources we'll send you the links to. We're almost at time. There was a question around, is it okay for sterile varieties of declared weeds to be sold? That's a very technical question. Is that a quick yes or no?
Well, yeah, that's a quick yes if they're listed on the declared plant policy. So there's exemptions to the declarations for these certain cultivars which are deemed to present a lower weed risk, whether because they're sterile or the seeds are less viable, things like that. But they can only be sold if they're listed by name on the policy, which is all freely available on the PIRSA website. Just search for whatever the weed name is, plant policy PIRSA, and it'll come up and you can read all about the weed.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, we're right on time at 5 o'clock. So thank you once again. There's one final question there that's a little bit detailed to a particular landholder. So Sue will follow you up afterwards in terms of how you can manage weeds from neighbours' yards and that kind of thing, in terms of whether it's declared and what rights you have and that kind of thing. So we'll follow you up, and we will send out an email to everybody after today with some of those great links, and hopefully Chris's slides as well with all those websites, so you can really dig down into the wonderful world of weeds and understand everything a little bit more. So thank you so much to you three for your time today, and Chris for presenting that. I'm sure everyone has learnt a lot, and we're getting some great comments in the chat as well. And Nat just reminded me that we'll also share there's a community session about controlling bluebell creeper that's being held in Coromandel East on Saturday the 16th of March from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So we'll send you some details around that. And our next session in the series is on the power of citizen science on Tuesday, the 26th of March. So we'll make sure we get that in your calendars. We'll send you the registration details and also a link to this recording if you want to go back and really go down the rabbit warren of some of those weeds that Chris skimmed through with us today. So thank you again for joining us, and thanks for all your questions and participating today. We'll see you next time.